Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Noah C. Rothman, senior writer for National Review, joins me. Noah, you weren't even a sparkle in your parents' eyes when the Watergate hearings were held, but I was a junior in high school and I had to watch every minute because I was taking summer school, and from the basketball coach who would roll the TV in, and we would watch Sam Ervin, called him Senator Heflin in the last segment, but it's Sam Ervin. Watched every minute of it for all 3 months. I want a select committee to dive into Arctic Frost. And Lindsey Graham agrees with me, just said so. What do you think? Oh, we can't hear you, Noah. We cannot hear you.
That was my fault.
All right,
I'd
go
love
ahead.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know exactly what such hearings would produce. I don't know if Senator Grassley, for example, whose pointed press conference revealed quite a lot of disturbing information. If he knows, he said subsequently to reporters that they don't have enough information to call for public hearings, which Jack Smith has said to which he would submit. But there's information out there that suggests that Grassley's accusation is right, that this was a fishing expedition. That wouldn't be atypical for a special counsel investigation. Special counsel investigations devolve into fishing expeditions all the time. They were curtailed as a result of their tendency to proliferate and to find broader targets. After there was kind of a consensus that forged around the notion that, well, after Iran-Contra, Republicans got it, and then after the Clinton hearings and the Lewinsky scandal, Democrats got it, so we should pare back the independence of the special counsel and put it back under the auspices of the DOJ. It has been circumscribed a little bit, but probably not enough. And such hearings would probably produce something around a consensus along those lines. Both Democrats and Republicans might agree to it because they both have been on the receiving end of fishing expeditions. But I don't know whether it would produce, and I suspect it would not produce something akin to a profound conspiracy.
I have pretty high hopes, and I would direct you to Jeff Shepard's The Nixon Conspiracy, what Team Archie Cox, or they called it Team Cox, he assembled 100 investigators and 60 lawyers. They worked in concert with the House Judiciary Committee and the Senate Select Committee to bring down Richard Nixon. We got no one to bring down, but we do have 160 people were targeted by this massive investigation. Add on the weaponization that goes back to the 2016 January meeting with Comey, Brennan, and Clapper and the president-elect in Trump Tower, and you've got 10 years of misconduct that if you put it in front of people, and you ask Jack Smith, just imagine, Noah, you got 160 subpoenas that went out from him in connection with Arctic Frost, and I'm looking at only that slide. You ask him, okay, why did you need Ted Cruz's phone records? What were you looking for? Right. Why did you tell the judge he was going to destroy evidence? I think we learned a lot.
Here's a thought experiment for you, Hugh, and I'm curious if what your assessment would be. You can't necessarily control open hearings. The enemy gets a vote, right? And one of the things that I think Donald Trump's administration and Republicans generally have benefited from is the closing down of the federal investigations into Donald Trump's conduct and the conduct of Republicans ahead of the January 6 riots. Now, does that open hearing open the potential to air some of the evidence that never got a hearing because the president was elected and shut down those investigations before they could come to fruition? Does such a setting allow Democrats to say, okay, here's the evidence that you didn't want to come out. We're going to present it in this broad public forum that you wanted?
Unlike the J6 committee, which was a sham committee, Nancy Pelosi ruined it on day one when, for the first time in the history of the Congress, she selected the minority members, and the minority did not participate, didn't get counsel, et cetera. Liz Cheney and the guy from Illinois were the only two Republicans on it, and they're both gone now. I would welcome that. I think, if you put 5 Republicans on there, you have to put 3 Democrats or 6 and 4 or something like that. And they get to call their own witnesses. They get their own staff if they want to look into what happened. Because I don't think there's a there. I absolutely think it's ridiculous, and that they spent 2.5 years on the J6 committee proving that it was ridiculous. And so if they want to go and waste their time on that, that's fine. But let the American people see what happened in D.C. between January. Well, actually, since the election night that Donald Trump won, that none of us expected, through to the second election night that Donald Trump won, that is the period of time in which I think permanent D.C. lost its mind. I think they absolutely were torn apart by Trump derangement syndrome. And we got a lot to learn about what happened, especially at DOJ, because it can ruin anyone, Noah. If you get DOJ going after someone, it can destroy them. It ought never to happen.
I think Democrats would sign on to that proposition. They're essentially arguing the same thing now with regard to James Comey, Letitia James, to a lesser extent, John Bolton, that the process is the punishment, in my colleague Andy McCarthy's estimation. I don't think anybody would disagree with that supposition now that the shoe is on the other foot, which is why I also think that if you were to have this public hearing, that you might forge a quiet consensus behind closed doors, that we also have to probably rein in some of these special counsels because we're all on the receiving end of it and it's very uncomfortable. But I'm skeptical.
Well, that's what
that
happened with the independent counsel law. The independent counsel law, after it gigged, Bill Clinton was allowed to sunset. And we might get some good rules about what do we do when the president's involved in a sketchy situation that are legit. You know,
well, so this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the rubber meets the road. Because the argument I'm hearing from Republicans, and I don't know if it's genuine, but the argument that I'm hearing from Republicans is that you need to put these Democrats on the hot seat, even if you have to fire prosecutors who won't bring charges because they don't think they're prosecutable, don't think they'll get a conviction. But you got to do it in order to show Democrats that this is what lawfare begets. You don't like it as much as we do. And then we have the option now to have a grand settlement. If you're genuine and honest and sincere in that supposition, then you would consent to this kind of a grand bargain. You might not even go to hearings because this is the proposition, right? That we're trying to muscle you into some sort of common sense compromise with us. So do they want the common sense compromise,
have to go
or do
to
they want
hearings,
the theater?
And I want the theater because it's an enormous problem. Robert Jackson, when he was Attorney General before he ascended to the court before Nuremberg, gave a famous address to prosecutors at the Department of Justice about how prosecutors have to be very careful with the power they have, or we'll end up like the Soviets, show me the man, I'll find you the crime, the Beria rules. And I think we're into Beria rules land right now. And I think we've got to root that out, Noah. That is only going to get worse unless you build a wall against it. You can't build a wall against it unless you know what happened. So I've got no fear of anything because I don't think Trump did anything wrong on January 6th other than move too slow and watch too much TV. But I don't think he incited anything. He was never charged with that. Jack Smith's fever dream of a charge in D.C. made no sense to me. And the Mar-a-Lago raid never... Go ahead.
I mean, if we were to presuppose, just accepting your premise, which I agree with, I think he moved too slow. But the January 6th Commission, which, by the way, was totally partisan, in part because Republicans boycotted it, they were offered the prospect of having a blue ribbon commission, a private investigatory mechanism that they declined to participate in. But the January 6th Commission did not establish, to my satisfaction, what the president was doing in the interim between the time when he was on the ellipse and when he was watching TV. And then when would they finally dispatch the National Guards to protect the Capitol? We really don't know the timeline yet in that, and I suspect that Republicans don't necessarily want to establish it.
I'm happy to find that out, but I want to find out how a partisan DOJ even presumed to wiretap and gain the records of Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and other members of the political opposition who were seated in the Senate. That's chilling, Noah. That if you can go after sitting senators, everybody is at risk of a rogue prosecutor. But to be continued. I think we agree. Let's have a party on the Hill. Don't go anywhere, America, except over to X. Find Noah C. Rothman there and come right back. Matt Continetti is next.